The 2026 Formula One season has had one race. Just one. And already the entire sport is facing a huge controversy. Because what happened during the Australian Grand Prix did not just decide the first winner of the new era. It exposed a serious problem with the new FIA rules. Drivers are frustrated. Teams are questioning the system. And now even Lewis Hamilton has openly admitted that something about the new regulations simply does not feel right. The race in Melbourne turned into a chaotic demonstration of how complicated the new hybrid era has become. Drivers overtaking each other, and then losing the position seconds later. Massive speed differences depending on who had electrical energy available. And races where battery management sometimes matters more than pure driving. At the same time, Mercedes dominated the weekend. Pole position, race victory, and a 1-2 finish with George Russell and Kimi Antonelli. While Mercedes celebrated, the rest of the grid started asking uncomfortable questions. Why does the racing suddenly feel so unpredictable? Why are drivers forced to think more about energy management than attacking the lap? And most importantly, did the FIA create a system that is now making Formula One more complicated and more dangerous at the same time? Because if the chaos we saw in Australia continues in the next races, the controversy surrounding the new rules could explode into one of the biggest debates Formula One has seen in years. What made the situation explode after the Australian Grand Prix was not just the result of the race. It was what the drivers experienced inside the cockpit. Because the moment the lights went out in Melbourne, many drivers immediately realized something about the new rules felt very different. The cars were not behaving in a predictable way during battles. One moment a driver could defend normally, then suddenly another car would appear behind with a massive burst of electrical power, closing the gap at an incredible speed. Not because the driver behind was simply faster, but because the hybrid system had more energy available at that exact moment. This is one of the biggest consequences of the 2026 regulations. The hybrid system now produces a much larger share of the total power output, which means energy deployment has become one of the most important tools in racing. Drivers must constantly decide when to deploy energy, when to harvest it, and when to conserve the battery for later in the lap. That might sound like a small detail, but during a race, it completely changes the rhythm of driving. Instead of attacking every corner flat out, drivers are sometimes forced to lift earlier before braking zones just to recover energy. Lewis Hamilton explained that this kind of management can feel unnatural in a Formula One car, because drivers are no longer just racing the track or their rivals. They are racing the battery as well, and that creates a strange side effect during overtaking battles. When one driver is deploying full electrical power and another is trying to recharge the battery, the speed difference between the two cars becomes enormous. In Australia, drivers reported moments where the closing speed between cars was dramatically higher than normal. That is why some drivers are worried about safety. Because at 300 kilometers per hour, even a small difference in speed can become dangerous. Now imagine a situation where one car suddenly gains 30 or 40 kilometers per hour more than the car in front simply because the energy systems are in different phases of their cycle. Reaction time becomes incredibly small. That is exactly why several drivers have started questioning whether the new rules went too far in the direction of energy management. For decades, Formula One has been defined by one simple principle: the fastest cars in the world, driven flat out by the best drivers on the planet. But the 2026 regulations introduce a very different philosophy. A Formula One car that is not only about speed, but about efficiency, energy conservation, hybrid strategy. From a technological perspective, the system is extremely advanced. But from the driver's perspective, the experience can feel very different. And that is why the FIA now finds itself in an uncomfortable position. Because the governing body designed these regulations to shape the future of the sport. Manufacturers like Audi and Ford joined Formula One specifically because of this hybrid concept. Teams have already invested enormous amounts of money developing these cars, which means the rules cannot simply be rewritten after one race. But the concerns from drivers cannot be ignored either. The Australian Grand Prix may have been the first real demonstration of how these cars behave in a full race environment. And what it revealed has triggered a debate that could grow much larger in the coming weeks. Because if the same chaotic racing patterns appear again in the next races, the pressure on the FIA to adjust the regulations could increase very quickly. And what started as a dramatic opening race in Melbourne may become the first major controversy of the 2026 Formula One season. But the frustration from drivers did not stop with the energy systems. Because the Australian Grand Prix also exposed another problem many drivers had already been worried about: the character of the cars themselves. Under the 2026 regulations, Formula One cars rely less on pure aerodynamic grip and much more on hybrid power. That means the cars behave very differently compared with previous generations. Less downforce in certain corners, more dependence on electrical deployment, and a car that can suddenly change its behavior depending on how the battery is being used during the lap. For drivers, that creates a completely new rhythm behind the wheel. Instead of attacking every corner at full speed, they are constantly thinking about the state of the battery, how much energy remains, when to deploy it, and when to recharge it. Lewis Hamilton made it clear after the race that adapting to this new style of driving is not simple. He admitted Ferrari still has work to do to catch Mercedes, but he also pointed out that the complexity of a new system forces drivers to manage far more variables than before. That complexity becomes even more obvious during wheel-to-wheel battles. Because when two drivers are fighting for position, they are not only thinking about breaking points and racing lines. They are also thinking about battery levels, deployment modes, and how much energy they can afford to use during the attack. This is why some overtakes in Australia looked almost strange. Drivers passing on one straight, then immediately losing the position again on the next one. Not because of driver error, but because the battery deployment cycles had changed. For some fans, this created exciting racing. But for drivers inside the cockpit, it felt unpredictable and sometimes frustrating. Another factor adding to the tension is the weight of the new cars. Even though the regulations aim to reduce weight slightly, the complex hybrid systems still make these machines heavy compared with older generations. When you combine that weight with less aerodynamic grip, the cars can feel more difficult to control at the limit, especially in high-speed corners. That is why some drivers believe the 2026 cars may require a completely different driving style. Less about pushing the car to the absolute limit every corner. More about managing the systems that control its performance. For veterans like Hamilton, who built their careers driving some of the fastest and most aggressive Formula One machines in history, that shift feels dramatic. And it raises a deeper question about the direction of the sport. Should Formula One be defined primarily by technological complexity, or by drivers pushing the fastest machines in the world to their absolute limits? The FIA now finds itself directly in the middle of that debate, because the governing body designed these regulations to represent the future of the sport. More efficient hybrid systems, more sustainable fuel, more advanced energy management. All of those goals make sense from an engineering perspective. But the reaction from drivers after the Australian Grand Prix shows that the balance between technology and racing may not yet be perfect. And that is why the next few races of the season will be extremely important. If teams and drivers quickly adapt to the new systems, the controversy may fade. But if the same problems appear again, if the racing continues to feel chaotic, if drivers keep warning about dangerous speed differences, then the pressure on the FIA will grow very quickly, because the 2026 season has only just begun. And already, the new era of Formula One is facing one of its first major debates. But the real reason the controversy is growing so quickly is something much bigger than one chaotic race. Is the future direction of Formula One itself. Because the 2026 regulations were not designed just for this season. They were designed to shape the sport for the next decade. New hybrid engines, sustainable fuels, a stronger electrical system delivering a much larger portion of the car's total power. From a technological perspective, it is one of the most ambitious rule changes Formula One has ever attempted. Manufacturers like Audi and Ford joined the championship precisely because of this new hybrid concept. For them, Formula One is no longer just a racing series. It is a laboratory for developing future road car technology. But for drivers, the priority is different. Drivers care about how the car behaves on track, how it feels when attacking a corner, how predictable it is when fighting wheel to wheel. And that is where the tension begins. Because several drivers now believe the balance between technology and pure racing may have shifted too far. Instead of pushing flat out every lap, they are constantly managing systems, battery levels, energy deployment, harvesting phases, overtake modes. Lewis Hamilton has made it clear that adapting to this level of complexity is one of the biggest challenges of the new era. Not only because the systems are difficult to manage, but because they change the rhythm of racing itself. And when the rhythm of racing changes, the entire character of Formula One changes with it. For decades, the identity of Formula One has been simple: the fastest drivers, the fastest cars, driven at the absolute limit. But the new regulations introduce something different. A Formula One car that is not only about speed, but about efficiency, energy optimization, strategic deployment of hybrid power. From one perspective, that makes the sport even more advanced. From another perspective, it risks turning drivers into managers of complex systems instead of pure racers. That is the debate now beginning inside the paddock. Some engineers believe this is the natural evolution of motorsport. The future of racing will always involve more technology, more software, more energy management. But some drivers believe Formula One must be careful not to lose what made it special. The sensation of pushing a car to the absolute limit. The feeling that every lap is an attack, not a calculation. And that is why the Australian Grand Prix may become such an important moment in the history of this new era. Because it was the first time these regulations were tested in a real race environment. Not in simulations, not in testing, but in a full competitive Grand Prix. And what that race revealed has already triggered a serious conversation inside the sport. If the next races show the same patterns,